movie nerds, and welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we're going to talk about Jurassic World Rebirth. But before we jump into my review of this movie, I just wanted to take a quick second and thank everyone who reached out to me, who messaged me, found me on social media, who really just wanted to check in and make sure I was okay after the last video where I talked about just sort of going through some tough times. I really appreciate it. I love you guys so much. Like, this is such a great community that I have, and I really just, it touched me a lot that you guys would reach out and check and make sure that I was all right. I am doing much better. I appreciate all of the support for sure. Hopefully this is a new season of things just continuing to get better. I am still sort of just struggling a little bit to get my reviews out, as should be self-evident from this one, because I saw this film on the 2nd of July. It is now the 5th of July. I tried to record yesterday and just really didn't like sort of how it was coming out. So I figured I would just wait for today and get it up today, even though, you know, it is already the weekend and I'm sure a lot of people have already gone out to see this film. So Jurassic World Rebirth. This one stars ScarJo, we've got Mahershala Ali, Jonathan Bailey. There are a number of people in this film who I feel like I had very high expectations for. And I knew that this one, or at least I think that this one, is the first. It sort of reminds me of maybe 28 years later. It is the first in what I feel like is going to be a continuum. They did leave this one wide open, in my opinion, for them to continue making films after this. And I think that that's probably where the title comes from, with Rebirth, of like starting it again, starting the franchise again, starting in a place with a new group of people where they can continue to make mediocre films with dinosaurs in them. Now, that right there should give away kind of what I felt of this one. But I feel like in terms of reviews, and if you are still contemplating whether or not to go see Rebirth, I would say it's really going to depend on what you're hoping to get out of these movies. If you are just looking for a movie that has very giant monsters in it and an occasional dinosaur, I think you're going to love it. It's got all of that in this film. But if you are looking for something, and this is really what I was sort of expecting, or what my expectations were, was not just giant dinosaurs, but a good story to go along with it. Because I think that that's where a lot of the Jurassic World movies have failed, is that they haven't had the greatest script going into it, especially like, for instance, the last film that came out where they brought back the OG cast from the first film, but the story that they were telling was not a good one. It was one that just didn't make much sense in terms of the franchise. It was a waste of bringing the OG cast back for that, in my opinion. And this one felt very similar. I have seen a lot of people saying that they got exactly out of it what they were hoping to, that it had a lot of, you know, really sort of more horror moments. I didn't get that feel from this movie. I thought that this one was the worst in the franchise. It's the one that I have liked the least of all of them, including the one that was just mostly about bugs. I really didn't like this one. I don't mind the scientifically played with dinos, right? The Indominus Rex and things of that nature, because to me, those still looked like legitimate dinosaurs, even though they were sort of like crossbreeds, essentially. They still looked enough like the rest of the dinosaurs in the films that it wasn't so far out of left field. But in Rebirth, the genetically modified dinosaurs here really just bothered me. It took me out of the movie. It became something else. It wasn't really a Jurassic Park movie for me at that point. It was just a monster movie, which is not exactly what I'm looking for with a Jurassic Park film, especially the D-Rex. I liked that one probably the least of all of the creatures in this movie, because even though I know that they drew inspiration from several different things. I've heard from the Xenomorph and from this in particular, which is what drove me nuts about it in the whole time, was that they'd drawn inspiration from the Rancor from Star Wars. And I really think that the D-Rex looked almost exactly like a Rancor, just given some extra arms. It's got just extra little bitty arms. And I hated it. I hated it because I don't want that crossover between those two franchises. I just don't. I don't go to a Star Wars movie looking for there to be dinosaurs in it, and I don't want to go to a dinosaur movie looking for elements of Star Wars. Like, that just doesn't bring me joy. I want them to be separate. I want to love the franchises for different things. And so having the D-Rex in there really was just, I don't know, it was pretty disappointing. This movie altogether was disappointing to me. It didn't have a lot of the elements that I was looking for, or I guess in my opinion, like my biggest failing or the thing that I liked the least was that it just didn't seem like they had spent really any time thinking of a good script. It's like they were thinking of these moments where they could put big monsters in, but they didn't necessarily think of how to build that connection between the characters and the audience. I think that this really has the issue of there being too many characters and not enough moments where you are connecting to those characters. So in Rebirth, we do have this sort of new thing. So there is this pharmaceutical company that needs the blood of 3 of the largest dinosaurs in order to make like a heart medication, essentially, that will extend the life of human beings. How you would ever, anyway, the science of who cares. So essentially what he does, or what this pharmaceutical rep does, is go out and get ScarJo, who's a mercenary, and she collects her own team, and they're going to go out with Jonathan Bailey, who's sort of a dino scientist, essentially. He's studied, he says, underneath Alan Grant, who never appears in this movie, and that's fine. But you have to bring the name into it to have people care about his character in any way, shape, or form. And they go out to this brand new island that, of course, we've never heard of before, where they were doing these genetically modified dinosaurs. And their whole goal is to get the blood of all of these dinosaurs. And I don't know if that idea in and of itself wasn't enough for the scriptwriters to try and make into a legitimate whole film, but then they had to go and sort of add this additional family, which I hated the entire way through. And maybe I'm the only one that did. But I felt like the acting from that family was the most poor of any of the actors in the film. And there weren't a lot of moments where I was like, the acting in this film is really great. Like, there were a lot more moments where I felt like it was just terrible from a lot of the different characters, not just from the family themselves. But they end up finding this family that for some reason is sailing in waters they know have giant dinosaurs in them because they have encountered them before, and they're attacked by one, the Mosasaurus, I believe, and it capsizes their boat, and so ScarJo's team has to go and sort of rescue them. Well, instead of using both sides of those, like both sets of characters, to build upon each other and give us these really great moments of, learning about the characters that we're being introduced to for the first time. Instead, what they did in this film was completely split them apart. They're going on 2 entirely different journeys to do a thing, and then they come back together pretty much at the end of the film. So because of the fact that you're tossed between these 2 sets of characters, you never really get to deep dive into any particular one. And of course, you have the dinosaur Dolores, which is really there to sell merch. It's like a little baby or tiny little dinosaur. It's like a smaller dinosaur that the little girl in the film becomes attached to. And that sort of frustrated me. There were a couple of moments in there where I was like, well, this doesn't really make all that much sense. And I think one of the things that I've heard is like, well, it's a dinosaur movie, so who cares about the plot? Well, that's why, for me at least, the plot is that much more important, because we're already talking about something that we can't conceive of as a reality in our world, right? And that's something that Michael Crichton did an exceptional job at when he wrote that first book, was making it believable, making it so that you could see this potentially happening. And that first film really had this element of you weren't sure who was safe or not. It's one of those things that I think also drew people to Game of Thrones, for instance, is you would fall in love with your favorite characters and then you would watch them die in these horrible, horrific ways, and you were surprised by it. You were afraid to come up with a favorite character because you didn't know if that character was going to be dead in the next episode. And the first Jurassic Park movie, I think, gave us that. You were sitting on the edge of your seat because anyone could go at any time. Any encounter that they had with the dinosaurs really could be the last one that they had. You know, you didn't know of the main characters if you were going to lose one at some point, because we did lose some characters that seemed like they were more than just extra side characters. And in Rebirth, I feel like you never really had that. The only people that you watch get taken by the dinosaurs or by any of these hybrids are the characters that you know from the start are just extras. People whose names you hear maybe once or twice, you know, characters that you know are essentially dinosaur food. And they're the only ones that really die. And all of the moments or the encounters with the dinosaurs with some of the main characters really just become these moments of, well, I know they're going to make it, so there is no investment here. I'm not worried about them coming out the other side because plot things would happen that would just make it so that everything turned out perfect for them. And a perfect scene for this, not to ruin it, this is a bit of a spoiler, but the perfect scene for it is the one that they incorporated into this film that was originally meant for the first film. And it's this raft scene where the characters are in a boat and they're going down the water. And of course, they're, you know, potentially attacked by dinosaurs and all of that nature. And so in this one, it is a T-Rex that they sort of disturb, and the T-Rex comes after them. And there are moments in this where it's like, well, the water is deep enough for the T-Rex to swim in. And then in the next scene, he can stand in it and the water is not that high. And then he attacks the boat and the whole raft is in his jaws and he is chomping on this raft. But it doesn't pop, it doesn't tear, it doesn't get a hole in it, it's not destroyed, and it ends up popping out the other side of this couple of rocks perfectly in location for these characters to utilize it and continue on their journey. It's just so unrealistic. And I think for a movie like Jurassic Park, or, you know, obviously these ones are titled Jurassic World, which right out of the gate, I feel like if it's titled Jurassic World anything, we know it's probably not going to be that great. But for Jurassic Park, because it's dinosaurs, I feel like you need a more realistic script. You need things to be well thought out and more believable in order for the film not to just seem silly. And Jurassic World Rebirth really just felt like everything was fine. Everything was going to work out. None of the things had to be logical. None of the stuff had to make sense. You know, I wasn't really concerned for any of the characters. And not only was I not concerned about them because of the way that it's written, that I just knew they were going to be okay because in every encounter they were all okay, but also I didn't really care about any of them in the first place. You never, like I mentioned earlier, have those moments where you are truly getting invested in these characters. And so I really didn't care if any of them died. Any of them could have. Like, I like Mahershala Ali. I find him to be a very good actor. I like ScarJo. I'm not totally won over on Jonathan Bailey the way that I feel like everyone else is won over on Jonathan Bailey. I haven't seen him in anything in particular that I really felt blown away by him. You know, I don't think that he's a terrible actor by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think that Jurassic Park is probably one of the first movies that I've seen him in for any extended period of time. I don't think I've watched a ton of his other works, but you know, it was just one of those things where it's like, well, I didn't really care all that much about him, and I didn't really see him as being completely vital to the whole point of the story. You know, I didn't really necessarily think that he needed to be there in the first place. Like, they talk him up as though he's this, you know, very important piece of the puzzle and he has to be there, but he doesn't really do all that much in the movie past that point. So it's like, was he necessary? Did he need to be there? And I found myself really just kind of irritated that we got these characters who was this like group of mercenaries who were very close to each other and who'd been through all of these previous battles and who didn't seem even remotely bothered by the fact that they were now surrounded by dinosaurs, right? But we didn't get to hear anything about them. We didn't get to learn where they had come from or what things that they had faced, or really get to learn these new characters that I assume we're going to see for several more movies after this. And that's disappointing for me. For me, Rebirth was probably the most disappointing one because it really just felt like a monster movie. And I don't necessarily go to Jurassic Park movies for a monster movie. I loved the first one because it had a lot of emotional impact. It was this story of, human nature and human against nature, and why making decisions like this, bringing dinosaurs back, is such a terrible thing, and what lessons there are to learn from that, and watching these terrible moments happen so that you learn the lesson of like, wow, we're not top of the food chain if we make decisions like this. And Rebirth just sort of felt like, I don't know, it felt like any other movie. It felt like the 10th Jason Voorhees film, where you really are just there to watch people die and watch the ones that you don't necessarily have all that investment in lose their lives. And it wasn't as much fun to me. I feel like if they're going to continue to do this franchise, which at this point, I don't know if I'm as invested in Jurassic Park the way that I was for the first couple of films. At this point, I feel like I'm kind of tired of what they have done with it, and that they clearly are sort of phoning it in at this point, just slapping together a cast of characters and putting some dinosaurs in it and not thinking about it beyond that. But I don't know. I really was hopeful that this would be the start of them going back to basics, because they had a good director, they had a good cast, and they had, I think, the original scriptwriter from the first film. So it's like, how did this go so poorly? How did you not know how to make this a winning combination? All of the elements were there, really, to be able to do that. And you didn't have all that many interactions with dinosaurs. I think there were a lot more interactions with the hybrids, which I'm not the biggest fan of just in general. But I don't know. This one was not a win for me. It was really disappointing. I was really expecting much better and did not get that out of this film. So we'll have to see sort of what they take from this. I know reviews have been sort of all over the place. Some people really don't like it. Some people really love it. Some people are kind of in the middle. I think it's really going to depend on what you're looking for in a Jurassic Park film in order to say whether or not you should go see this one in theaters. It's going to depend on what you want out of these types of movies, right? And if you've enjoyed most of them, you probably will enjoy this one also. It's not going to be outside of that wheelhouse, really. But if you were looking for something that is reminiscent of that first film, that not only had, good impactful moments with dinosaurs, but had a good cast of characters, then I'm not sure this one is going to be for you. But those are just my thoughts on Rebirth. I would love to know what you guys thought of the next Jurassic Park film if you have seen it. Subscribe to join the Movie Nerd family, and I hope to see you in the next episode.